Support comes from Mosby Building Arts. This year, put your trust in Mosby Building Arts for fresh designs and the elevated remodeling experience you deserve. Inspiration at callmosby.com.
From the St. Louis Public Radio satellite newsroom of my kitchen table, this is The Gateway. It's Monday, January 26th. I'm Abby Larico. St. Louis Board of Aldermen President Megan Green made economic incentive reform a focus of her first 3 years at the head of the board. But she says there's more work to be done.
For example, you look at downtown at the moment. Probably the biggest issue with downtown is the same issue we have with our region, and that's fragmentation.
Sitting down with Green to discuss tax incentives, coming up after this news on The Gateway. How about all that snow? Yes, we're still talking about the weather because those icy cold temperatures aren't rolling out anytime soon. Experts say to bundle up this week to protect from the extreme cold that is settling into the region. St. Louis Public Radio's Jeremy Goodwin has details.
The National Weather Service is warning about dangerously cold temperatures today. The wind chill could fall as low as 23 degrees below zero. Weather Service meteorologist Ben Herzog says that cold isn't just uncomfortable, it can hurt you.
Very dangerous conditions outside, so we're encouraging people to stay inside. They do have to go outside, bundle up as much as you can, dress in layers, and just limit your exposure to those temperatures. As we look forward to the rest of this week, that cold it's here to stay.
Wind gusts today and tomorrow could reach 10 miles an hour. Overnight lows this week will be around zero, and highs will barely crack 30 degrees. That's according to the National Weather Service. I'm Jeremy Goodwin, St. Louis Public Radio.
MoDOT says their road crews have worked around the clock plowing streets since snowfall began Saturday. But drivers should still expect snowy conditions today and drive with caution. Bob Becker is maintenance engineer for the St. Louis office of the Missouri Department of Transportation.
There's still going to be snow out there. There's still going to be some snow on the roadway. Those roads aren't going to be clean. Your car won't react like it normally does in these conditions. So please be careful.
Becker says snow removal went well over the weekend because many people did stay off the roads. But he added it will take plow crews multiple passes over each road to clear all the snow that the storm dumped on the region. School districts across the St. Louis area have canceled or adjusted classes today because of these hazardous road conditions. Clayton, Belleville, East St. Louis, Rockwood, Riverview Gardens, and Rolla school districts are among those that have closed for the day, a true snow day. Virtual learning days, though, are planned for Confluence Academies at St. Louis Public Schools, the Francis Howell and Pattonville school districts, as well as Edwardsville Community Unit School District 7 and others. All St. Louis City and County Library branches are closed today. Flights through Lambert St. Louis International Airport are largely moving as scheduled as of 5 a.m. Monday morning, though more than 150 flights were canceled on Sunday, according to FlightAware. The weekend snowfall offered many people a good reason to stay home, inside, and warm. For others, though, like 5-year-old Finnegan McNeve, it was the perfect chance to work up some speed and shred some fresh pow, which was drier and fluffier than we typically see around here. Ideal conditions for Finnegan's blue sled, which he busted out at Compton Hill Reservoir Park in St. Louis on Sunday. Sarah McNeve, his mother, admires his technique.
I think he gets that from his dad, who loves to snowboard and do the same thing. Yeah. We grew up sledding, and we wanted to have him have that experience as well. We just love being outside in the snow and having fun.
In temps like these, though, the National Weather Service recommends limiting time outdoors to 20 to 30 minutes, even for fun, even when well equipped. For more coverage on the local weather response, including warming center resources, snow removal plans, and a couple recipes for French toast that are simply chef's kiss, visit stlpr.org. Scott Air Force Base will soon have a new responsibility, hosting the headquarters for the military's moving company. STLPR's Will Bauer reports on the change announced by Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth.
Starting in May, the Metro East Military Base will host what's known as the Defense Personal Property Program. That's the program designed to make sure soldiers and their families can ship their household items when they are reassigned every couple of years. Hegseth says the current system has been notorious for issues, like damaging furniture.
We know moving is difficult for everyone involved, every person in that family. So our warfighters deserve the kind of predictability, accountability, and respect during that process. Brings the stress down and makes it something they can focus on their job.
The change is a result of a task force formed last year that aimed to improve the current program. Scott's selection for the headquarters fits into the base's broader mission of transportation and logistics. I'm Will Bauer, St. Louis Public Radio.
The Missouri Supreme Court has struck down a law that allows for the Secretary of State to rewrite ballot language that is challenged in court. The law also included a policy allowing the AG to appeal preliminary injunctions granted in instances where the state or a statewide official cannot enforce a law or statute. The unanimous ruling from the court found that the law violated the Missouri Constitution's original purpose requirement. That means a portion of the law was not closely related enough to what the bill was initially intended to do. Lawmakers could try again this session to pass legislation that would stand up to legal scrutiny. Missouri's House Majority Leader says a slew of GOP-friendly ballot initiatives may face challenges in getting passed this year. The Republican-controlled legislature placed measures on the 2026 ballot banning most abortions and restricting constitutional amendments through the initiative petition process. Voters may also decide on a plan to phase out the state's income tax. House Majority Leader Alex Riley of Springfield says if 2026 is a bad year for his fellow Republicans, GOP-friendly ballot measures could face hurdles too.
We've had plenty of other tricky election cycles, and like we've talked about, we've overperformed in those. But yes, you are correct. That is a tricky dynamic for us.
Voters could also decide the fate of a more Republican-leaning congressional map that lawmakers approved last September. You can listen to Riley's extended interview from the Politically Speaking Hour on St. Louis on the Air at stlpr.org. A federal jury has found a former St. Louis alderman guilty of insurance fraud. As STLPR's Rachel Lippman reports, Brandon Bosley will be sentenced in April.
The jury deliberated for about 8 hours over 2 days before finding Bosley guilty of 4 felonies, including wire fraud and lying to a federal agent. Bosley asked a business owner in his former 3rd Ward to inflate the cost of repairing a used car that had been damaged in a 2021 accident. That allowed Bosley to claim the car had been totaled and receive an insurance payout of almost $8,000. Bosley rejected a plea deal last week. He also faces trial in state court on an unrelated misdemeanor charge. I'm Rachel Lippman, St. Louis Public Radio.
The husband of former Democratic Congresswoman Cori Bush has avoided conviction for pandemic loan fraud. Attorneys for Courtney Merritt said in a press release Friday that jurors could not come to a unanimous decision, but lean toward a not guilty verdict. Merritt was accused of lying on applications for small business loans and spending the $21,000 on personal expenses. Thousands of people have been charged with pandemic loan fraud, generally for much higher amounts than Merritt was accused of stealing. His attorneys say he was prosecuted solely because of his marriage to Bush. Arts and humanities advocates say a budget proposed by Missouri Governor Mike Kehoe could hurt arts institutions and groups across the state. St. Louis Public Radio's Chad Davis reports.
Arts leaders discussed the potential reduction during a Missouri House of Representatives budget meeting last week. The Missouri Arts Council would lose almost $4 million. Michael Donovan is the Missouri Arts Council executive director. He says the cuts could be detrimental to the economy.
And the state has a $1.7 billion economic impact from the arts. And part of that is the arts that attracts people in tourism.
Donovan says 90% of the council's budget goes toward arts grants. And if they'd have to make cuts, it would be to every district. A spokesperson for Kehoe says cuts across the state are necessary to deal with a projected deficit exceeding $2 billion. I'm Chad Davis, St. Louis Public Radio.
A $62 million STEM center at Harris-Stowe State University should attract new students and help break down barriers to the job market, school leaders say. A 2022 study said Black workers only represent 7% of the region's tech workforce. Harris-Stowe President LaTanya Collins-Smith said at a groundbreaking ceremony that the new building will support the school's efforts to open the fields of science, technology, engineering, and math to everybody.
Harris-Stowe is the institution in Missouri that leads in educating underserved and underrepresented communities in STEM.
The STEM Center should be open for business and study after the first of next year. When Megan Green became St. Louis Board of Aldermen President in 2022, she said reforming tax incentives for development was one of her top priorities. More than 3 years later now, she sat down with St. Louis Public Radio's economic development reporter Kavahn Mansouri to discuss the progress the city has made and what more needs to be done.
You really can't talk about economic development without talking about its impact on schools. And so for me, that's always been one of the driving forces, is to make sure that we're very intentional with our use of tax incentives, because we need as much revenue going into our public schools as possible. I think the other piece of that is to make sure that we're not over incentivizing projects, because beyond our public schools, our city coffers rely on tax revenue from new development. And if we're constantly, giving out tax incentives that last for 10, 15, 20 years, and then that they expire, and then, inevitably there's then another request to re-up it, we never end up realizing that actual, economic activity for the city.
I know that early 2000s, the city, if you look at sort of the scale of things, they went a little incentive crazy. But then in recent years, things have kind of crawled to sort of a halt. Can you kind of talk about how we got to where we're at now?
Sure. When I first moved to St. Louis in 2005, I was actually a Coro Fellow, and it was the first time that I had actually learned about tax incentives. And it was kind of at the height of that frenzy of use of tax incentives. And there was this kind of mythos out there at the moment that said, in 10 years, the city is just going to be so rich because all of these, abatements are going to, run out, and then we're going to have all this money. Well, then that 10 years came and that didn't happen. And then there had been a number of subsequent, follow-up reports that actually showed that quite a bit of the development that was subsidized would have happened regardless, and that it didn't really move the needle for our city. What was also eye-opening to me is when I first got to the Board of Aldermen, there were literally no standards for development. We did not have fiscal notes, and so we didn't actually know the fiscal impact of anything we were passing. And it was a battle over, a number of years to get fiscal notes in place, to get some standards in place, to get some evaluation in place. And then, that really culminated a couple years ago in the SLDC creating the Economic Justice Scorecard and Community Benefit Scorecard, because what that told us is now we're setting out a standard of what we want development to look like in this city.
What more would you like to see going forward?
I think that there's still a lot of work to be done, especially when we look at standardizing development. For example, you look at downtown at the moment. Probably the biggest issue with downtown is the same issue we have with our region, and that's fragmentation. We have so many different, tax incentives that have been issued to different buildings. We have, dozens of special taxing districts, 2 different kind of competing SIDs, multiple civic organizations. And so there's no unified vision or direction to say, hey, if I'm a developer who wants to, invest in downtown, I know that if I go down there, I will get XYZ if I do, this type of project. So I think there's a lot of work that still needs to be done to kind of even focus our scorecard a little bit more in certain areas of the city to make it clear that this is the type of incentive that you would qualify for if you make certain criteria based upon the type of development we want to see in those areas.
That was St. Louis Board of Aldermen President Megan Green speaking with STLPR's Kavahn Mansouri about tax incentives for development in the city. You can hear a longer version of their conversation tomorrow on St. Louis on the Air. The Gateway is a production of St. Louis Public Radio, a listener-supported service of the University of Missouri St. Louis. Music by Ryan McNeely of Adult Fur. I'm Abby Larico, and from my home newsroom setup where I had assistance from a particularly adorable audio engineer in setting up my microphones, this has been The Gateway.